right here is to provide a very high-level overview of what we did for the last 6 years. Rusha is actually your moderator, but we thought I would give the overview and hand over to her. You're also going to hear from 4 presenters who will keep it to 5 minutes each, right? Yes. And our goal is really to have a conversation about what innovation is, what's working and why, or why not, and how we can improve our use and development of innovations going forward. All right. So the SPARC has the Innovation Research Facility. It's a whole work stream within SPARC. At the beginning, however many years ago, we said, what the heck is innovation? How do you define this? Because by default, everyone thinks about digitech. Innovation is digital or a technology, a widget. I always call it widgets. We decided to define it as innovation just means doing something differently in that context. And you'll see why we started with this definition and stayed with this definition. SPARC really set out to say, first, what are the innovations that are out there in the drylands or in the fragile contexts? Who is innovating? What are they innovating? Why are they innovating? Who is the innovation trying to reach and for what outcome? What innovations have the potential to scale and why? As well as what is that enabling environment that either supports innovation development, R&D, or innovation adoption. So this is really what we wrestled with since day one. The very first inception phase, we began with the question, what innovations are out there? The first step was literally to do a whole lot of Google searching, a whole lot of interviews, a whole lot of asking who knows what is out there, specifically for being implemented in dryland or fragile contexts. We took a bit of a value chain approach, where we mapped these innovations along the value chains. And as you can see, a large percentage of them fall within the information and training sessions. Very much household-facing information exchange or technical advising, etc. The other innovations that we identified early on are sprinkled along other parts of the value chain. We also started to differentiate the different innovations. Are these new business models? Are they enabling policy practices? Are they partnership models? Digital technologies affecting distribution channels and behavioral insights. So they kind of got categorized in this. Then, we then went to the next question. Well, what is the scale or the depth of impact that these innovations are trying to address in relation to shocks and stresses? So we used the iceberg, which here is a triangle. We found that the vast majority are household or individual facing, really trying to help people address the immediate shock in the shock, or it's trying to address behaviors and patterns. We found very few structural innovations addressing structures. This may be some of the partnership models, basically how work is done, but not necessarily, it might be organizational innovations for organizations, innovation for government. There was very little out there on that. And we found 0 mental models, really completely changing how you think about something and how you approach it, at least specific to the drylands. We took these, we found 45. So this is the first 6 months of SPARC. We found 45 innovations and created an innovation dashboard, which today you can go to if you go to sparkknowledge.org and go to the innovations page. So we've identified, like, gosh, we found these innovations. Everyone is always asking, what innovations are out there? We wanted to make them publicly accessible and sortable. So if you go to the dashboard, you'll see the filters and such. This page is really just about sharing information. There's not really any analysis attached to this, but it gives you the contacts, the websites, etc. In the end, the innovation research portfolio had to make a decision on what it was going to do research about. We ended up saying we want to prioritize innovations in governance, digital technologies or the digital ecosystem, and weather and climate information services. About halfway through SPARC, we said, what business model innovations are happening? And we also found an opportunity to partner with an impact investing group who wanted to look at innovations in anticipatory action or innovations specifically for humanitarian contexts. So we did some work around that. Really wanted to understand women's empowerment and social inclusion and the relationship with either innovation creation or innovation adoption. And then at the end, we really did a big synthesis and looked at some of the enablers of adoption. And one of the products was the perceptions of risk that Wendy presented in the last session. A few things to say about this innovation research. Most of the innovations were found online or by networks, which typically means we missed the vast majority of them that were out there. You miss those grassroots innovations that are happening on a day-to-day basis. That person who is just planting something differently, that's managing their herd differently, that built that really great rack on their back of their motorbike that allows them to efficiently transport goods. These small innovations that have very big impact at a small scale. Those, you just don't see them, they don't have a web presence. So that digital footprint or web-based footprint really influenced our innovation. And I say that or I stress that because I want everyone in the room to think about how do they define innovation? What are their expectations of what an innovation is and who it needs to be serving? And with that, Risha, I'm going to hand over to you, and you can kick us off with our presenters, please. And you can be over there.
Oh, I'm definitely competing. I'm not going to do it. So again, welcome everyone, and thanks for also staying a bit late. But yeah, we can assure you it's going to be a very exciting session. So just to add on to a little bit of context as to why this session is important, we heard in the previous session that the multitude of risks that actually the pastoral community faces, and the fact that they all happen more or less at the same time, and they have to keep dealing with it at any given point in time. Part of the solution lies in the innovations that we do, or the innovations that come up from the local communities, but also thinking that innovations, again, is just not about the technology, the high-tech solutions, but it is also about processes, it's about institutions. And that's what we want you to think. As we run through this session, we want you to sort of showcase, see and think about, as the showcase of all these innovations that are happening, how do you really define innovation? And really, the work that we are doing, is it really innovative or is it just reinventing the wheel? Reinventing the wheel does not qualify as innovation, by the way. So with that note, the way that we are going to run this process is that we have 4 speakers. I invite all the 4 speakers to come in front, please. You know who you are. It's Miguel, Milka, Jeffrey, and Peter. No, they can sit here and they can just go to the. It's just easier, I think, here. And people can keep seeing them. Yes. So the way that we are going to do is that we are going to spice this up a bit. We are not going to have the general way where the speakers just keep talking and talking and talking, and then after that, like introduction, talking, questions, and that's it. So we are going to do tech, process. So basically, we are going to have first 2 speakers, and then after that, we are going to have I'm going to ask them some questions, they're going to respond, and then we are going to go to the next, and then you throw it up to the audience, and then after that, we all end with some business words. So with that, I would first like to introduce Miguel Uribe, who is the Director of Economics at the Causal Design with over 12 years of experience conducting meticulous quantitative research on labor, trade, sustainable development, and economic growth. He regularly collaborates with government, non-governmental, and international organizations to align different interests and perspectives for designing evaluations and research studies and recommending public policies. Miguel worked as a team leader and principal investigator for the evaluation of After-Scout interventions. The next speaker in that order is Peter Avin. Peter Avin is co-founded the Cow Tribe to solve a simple but critical problem, the vaccine access gap for Africa's smallholder farmers. Under his leadership, Cow Tribe has evolved from a last mile delivery service into a comprehensive digital platform, now serving 75,000 farmers and delivering over 30 million vaccines annually. That's pretty impressive. Today, Peter is pioneering a new digital trust infrastructure for livestock using verifiable health data and traceability to transform animals from vulnerable assets into sources of financial security and economic resilience for pastoral communities. I'm sure all of us can resonate with that. So with that, over to you.
Hi
You have
everyone.
5 minutes.
Okay, so this is the research that I've been working with my colleague Sophie and evaluating two interventions implemented by AfriScout. So let's go to the presentation. So we are, as I just said, evaluating the impact of two distinct innovations that were introduced by global communities under the AfriScout program. One is Supporting Steward that was implemented in Kenya, and it has like a long history already. And this intervention provides pastoralists with near real-time information on rangelands conditions through a mobile app. On the other end, we have another intervention, like a sister one, that has been implemented in Ethiopia. It's called AfriScout Region, and this one is providing intensive community-level grazing support using an adaptive multi-paddock grazing approach. Both of them, we evaluated them. The time frame was from, we started designing everything around like the end of 2022, and we finished like data collection like at the beginning of this year, and we wrapped up like the report like over the last weeks, months. The methodology that we use, it's a mixed methods approach whereby we combine a randomized control trial methodology where we were able to have like a treatment and control area that allows us to estimate the causal impact of the intervention with a qualitative inquiry that would allow us to go more in depth and understand the whys and the mechanisms behind the results that we're finding. Going like straight to the findings. So for AfriScout Steward, the app, like both the quantitative and qualitative data reported that pastoralists using the app use the app to reduce unnecessary migrations, and that itself leads to a reduced stress and improved health. Also, we found like positive outcomes on grazing. For example, treatment households were slightly more likely to migrate to areas that had a better pasture. And also, when we, in the qualitative inquiry, we found like also many of the pastoralists of the beneficiaries had said that the app helped them identify appropriate times to migrate and appropriate grazing locations. Now, the study, one thing that was not necessarily expected, but was very interesting, that we found like a large amount of spillovers. Actually, even though initially we designed it so that treatment households would be the one that would be receiving the training and not the control, we found that many people in the pastoralists in the control area said that they had received the training. This is like something that complicated a little bit the evaluation of the intervention, but also highlighted how fluid information is in this context and how pastoralists by their nature are sharing all the time information. That can be something actually positive in the sense of like, how do you introduce an app? It's not necessarily to go everywhere, but there might be ways in which you introduce it in certain areas and it's just gonna spread if obviously people accept it and people find it useful, which is something that the qualitative inquiry showed that people find in general, they find useful the app, they use it as complementary to the approaches that they usually follow. terms of at-risk region, and this was like the evaluation of something completely new, was very interesting for us. We found really like very high, very positive results. There was a very high uptake of hands-on grazing planning advice, and as well as an important impact on collective decision making in treatment areas. We saw like higher increase of like communities acting collectively when it comes to range management. This had a bunch of different impacts. On one end, people in treatment areas were much more satisfied with the quality of pasture that they have access for their livestock. That had impact on the rangeland conditions. That impact on rangeland conditions led to improvements in herd condition and finally also in well-being, like higher monetary. I mean, their cattle, their herd were more valuable. Also, the products of this. So that had like very positive impacts. But also, like we found like positive impacts more on the non-financial well-being. Things as like a reduced time burdens of livestock care, greater cooperation, and reduced conflict between community members. Now, some action points. A couple of things that we found. So important to ensure that interventions are designed and tailored to local context, importance of co-creating interventions, and important to consider the trade-offs between impact, scalability, and budget when you're designing your intervention. And I'll leave now.
Is it good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're coming from. My name is Peter Awin, and I'm the CEO of Cartwright. Cartwright is a technology company based in Ghana and also working in Kenya, and our main focus is on supporting smallholder farmers to access animal vaccines. We started in 2017, and we've been operating mainly in Ghana, leveraging on drone and digital technology to provide access to animal health services generally. Today, I'm just going to share a context to.
Okay, one more.
Am I going backward?
No, we're out of order. So go ahead and keep going until you see yours. We'll get 30 seconds more for that. Go back. Oop, you'll lose that. Hey,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, so today I'm just going to share some insights on a recent project that we conducted a couple of 3 years ago. It came because, as a commercial company, one of the key focus of working with smallholder farmers is to try to understand the context of their livelihoods and all that. So in delivering our services, annually we analyze the data that comes out of our service delivery. And I remember in 2023, during the review of our data, we realized that only 10% of the smallholder farmers were women. And so we started digging in to understand why are women not participating in our services. And in digging, we understood that it's not just about economic issues, it's also about the gender norms and other things within the communities that also affected how they participated in these services. So we came together with ILRI and Care International to try to understand, dig deeper to understand why these norms exist and how we can actually be able to solve these norms in order to allow these women to participate more in our services. We tried to test 2 approaches, and I think for the benefit of time, I will leave the explanation out. But one is the gender transformative approaches, and then the other is the accommodative approaches. While one is looking at just recognizing the existing systems and structures and trying to navigate around them, the other one is actually going beyond that to see how can we tackle these gaps to ensure that women can participate more in services. And we implemented that in the northern part of Ghana, where you can see the resemblance to the Asa regions in Kenya and other places in East Africa. We focused more on smallholder farmers, and we looked at how vaccine delivery in general is, how we implement our vaccines. That was normal throughout the communities, but in some communities we engage the farmers more on more transformative approaches, for instance, using drones to deliver the services to them. And at the end of the research, we identified that gender transformative approaches showed higher, significantly higher empowerment score compared to the accommodative approaches. Notwithstanding, in all communities that we tested this, we saw that there were improvements in service delivery for women, and in particularly, women had more access to vaccine services over the 3-year period. And we also noticed that actually these norms are very, very entrenched in the system and all that. And because of that, no matter how innovative you are, you need to take into consideration that norms can also bring some challenges to how your innovation could be adopted by a specific group of people. In terms of our action, we concluded that it is really, really important to integrate some of these. For whichever program that you are running, it's important to integrate accommodative or gender transformative approaches in that to be able to have more change in terms of norms and ensure that you can be able to tackle these norms and have more empowerment for women. For the government, we've been trying to work with the government because part of the project was to approach this from the government level because policies are very important in how vaccine services are delivered. So we've been thinking of can policies actually be able to navigate these norms as a way, like when we are building government programs, can we include these integrations to ensure that it's and then talking through the project, we use community champions a lot because it could be even male champions. It doesn't have to be female champions, and we noticed that in including champions, you are able to get more participation for women. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miguel and Peter, and thanks for keeping the time. So let me start with you, Miguel. It's very interesting that it's so tech-oriented, but it has so much of process related to it. So, Miguel, I want to start with you. You have evaluated both the region as well as the steward. How do you compare them in terms of the factors of uptake?
So I think first it's important to notice that we shouldn't think of them as like two competing things. It's like two different approaches, but kind of like that each one has its strengths and each one is kind of like has some positive things. And at the end, both of them are trying to have the same objective, which is like helping pastoralists to make better decisions and improve the region. So on one end, we have like steward is much more targeted towards individuals. It's like providing individuals information that then they use in their communities and embedded into their decision making, while region is more targeted towards providing specific advice on regional management and organizing intervention management approach within community. So it's somehow like individual, that's why the title was like individual or community. That's kind of like why we want to frame it like that. Right now, steward is more, it relies on this and app. Specifically, where region right now was like more support and guidance, but Africa is developing as well on it, so there is still like, and here like I think I wanted to highlight this because remember what Carmen was saying about innovation is not necessarily tech, it's not widget, and effectively like we see like Africa steward is, but right now region is not. It was like more this approach and this guidance and support. In terms of the uptake, I think like both of them have the same element of unique buy-in from the community. And one of the, at least like from evaluating these projects and a lot that came out in the qualitative inquiry was like, people will buy into something if they have been part of the process to design. Like if they feel that they have been taken into consideration and both the app as well as the region, the process was designed like as co-creating this these innovations. It was not like let's come and that's what you have to do. But for example, in the case of region, it's like taking an approach like that initially maybe was like developed for other areas, go into this like new land and how can it work for pastoralists and start working with them. And that's kind of something that we really works well in terms of the buying. Another thing like that came out was in terms of you start seeing positive, if the community sees positive results, they're kind of gonna be interested. And they're gonna naturally also want to, okay, this seems to work, and they're gonna want to kind of probably on their own, even if you don't go to them, they're gonna try to go to you and okay, how is this working? We saw it in region, it was interesting how some of the qualitative study, we found some people were saying, oh, we have people from other communities that come to our area because they see that the land is producing there and they're very interested. Which it's positive sometimes that can create conflict. So it's an area where it's you also need to think about how to avoid conflict, but that was also positive in terms of people see there are results and people are gonna go are gonna look for that.
Okay, thank you so much, Miguel. Peter, moving to you. Of course, we know that the entire issue of vaccines is something which has been very, very donor-driven. And of course, many organizations also deliver the vaccines as a public good, and ILRI is one of them, actually. But Tribe, you are a business entity, you're a private sector essentially, and your main goal in life is to make sure that you break even and it's just not the revenue, but you actually have a profit, right? So can you walk us through the core innovation in your business model to sort of help you transform essentially a service which has been so dependent on donor funding?
I used to say that if you can sell insurance, you can also sell vaccines. So those who are selling insurance here, I clap for you. But this is a core issue of if you are dealing with certain products that are generally given out for free, it's not just the importance of the product, but how we approach this. Vaccine has generally over the past years are seen as more a donor-driven or government service. And it's the same situation in Ghana, where even in this current situation, current moment, most of the farmers that we work with still look forward to one day getting free vaccines from the government. So, but if you look at how we approach that, I think education is really, really key in that because farmers generally don't want to keep their animals just to use them at some point. So just having them as part of the co-creation of the product. And at the beginning, we noticed that leveraging on early adopter model is very, very key in how you roll it out to be able to be accepted. So in most communities that we go to, less than 4 to 5% would normally purchase vaccines from us. But over time, in 3-4 years time, you see that 8% of them are buying because we are leveraging on the experiences of the earlier customers to be able to build across the community. And then the second part is just the collective efforts of farmers. We noticed that putting farmers into groups and having them encourage each other actually allow them to purchase more vaccines. But again, this is still a business. We are still struggling to break even because vaccine is the cheapest commodity, even though we are selling millions and millions every year, but we still realize that it's not that easy to break even. But our assumption is that with scale, moving into more markets, newer markets, and looking at how to reduce the cost of getting. And for instance, when we started, we were doing ground delivery, but now we are using drone delivery that has cut our cost from 28% to around 12%. So some of these innovations actually allow us to look at the economic aspects, the commercial aspect of the business, and just looking at how we're empowering farmers.
Thank you so much, Peter. Yeah, the drone one clearly works. So this is actually a very good segue into the next group of people, picking up on what you said, Peter, about the community, about the early adopters, and also the ones who sort of trailblaze or set examples. So with that, I now welcome my two next speakers. The first one is Milka. Ms. Milka Asamba, SPARC Innovation Research Manager, comes from a market research background. She has more than 15 years of experience in marketing and social research projects in East Africa. She's passionate about research that focuses on livelihoods, gender, women, empowerment, nutrition, and climate. I think this is coming out to be very good. We have a lot of emphasis on gender, which literally never happens at conferences. My next speaker is Jeffrey. Sorry, I'm trying to find. Yeah, Dr. Jeffrey Lenguya works with Mexico under the resilient approaches in natural rangelands ecosystem. The range program, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with over here, in Samburu County, Kenya. He holds a PhD in range management from University of Nairobi and specialization in rangeland ecology, climate resilience, and sustainable livelihoods in pastoralists and dryland communities. His work emphasizes locally led innovations and partnerships that strengthen household and community and market systems to withstand shocks and stresses, particularly in fragile and conflict-affected environments. Over to you, Mita. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. This study, Women Economic Empowerment is a Pathway to Innovation. We conducted it with Tigist. Tigist is based in Ethiopia and was not able to be here today. So when we started this study, we wanted a focus on women. We wanted to focus on women, and we wanted to understand what are women doing in this topic of innovation. So these are some of the study objectives that guided our study. We wanted to understand the community's definition of women economic empowerment and innovation. And then we were trying to identify formal and informal innovations. And innovations can also be categorized from incremental, which are basically institutional, from incremental to institutional to disruptive, that are created and or are used by pastoral women. We wanted to explore the positive factors of innovation amongst pastoral women during times of crisis. And we also wanted to examine the prevailing links between women-led innovations and women economic empowerment. So this study was conducted in Somaliland, specifically in villages in Hargeisa and Wajale. And the fieldwork was done in May and June. So we traveled down to Somaliland and spent some weeks with the women and the men in Somaliland. So there's quite a bit of findings that came from the study, but I've limited this 3 to this particular forum. So in women seeking economic opportunities, it leads them to challenge cultural norms and make personal sacrifices, all within the strong cultural and social aspect of the Somali culture. They don't remove themselves from it, they work within it, but they innovate around it to actually pursue economic opportunities. And then it's the younger, not yet married, and the older women who are actively pursuing empowerment. So, and this is because family expectations and roles, including childcare, supersede economic pursuits. So even as we're developing women economic programs, we need to factor that strong aspect of childcare and marriage, expectations of marriage that then hinder them to actually pursue economic empowerment and innovations. And then finally, women build on and integrate traditional knowledge with formal training, and quite a number of speakers have spoken about that. So I'm just repeating what has been said. And here we have an example of one of the traditional animal health workers, the female, who was traditionally trained, but then she's expanded her knowledge by attending formal training. And now through that is able to actually expand the animal health services within this community. Why specifically women? Because again, within the Somalis, the relationships between men and women are strongly regulated, yeah? So, and because women have specific parts of life that they look after, it makes sense that they should also have female animal health workers looking after them. So that's all for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, that need to go in reverse order.
Should I go in front or should I?
No, the back.
The back?
Yeah.
Okay, I got it.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. You get 30 seconds extra for that. This is not the one, right? Yeah. We started all from scratch. There you go.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I'm sure everyone is very tired, but and thank you for giving us this time. Yeah, I'm presenting these findings on behalf of my colleagues who are away outside this country. 5 very good researchers. So we actually were doing this research in northern Kenya. The title is Enabling Adaptation. And this is the power of participatory approaches to facilitate locally led climate adaptation in northern Kenya. And for us, we actually realized that there are a dozen of emerging literature, especially on how to realize local led adaptation in practice. But despite these literature that we actually have gaps. And the most important gap is how to design and implement the local adaptation approaches that actually addresses the needs of these communities, the communities that are in these areas, especially the arid and semi-arid areas. And yeah, that is what we actually wanted to address. We wanted to fill the evidence gap in understanding how participatory approaches and decision-making shape the ability of diverse stakeholders to overcome barriers to locally led climate adaptation. And to do this, we actually partnered with one of the range programs and one of the Mexico programs. The name of the program is actually the range program, Resilient Approaches in Natural Rangeland Ecosystems. And we implemented this project in northern Kenya, that is Isiolo, Marsabit, and Samburu counties. We started last year, September, and the end of the research was actually March 2025. And throughout this research, we actually adopted a participatory approach and worked to embed what we refer to as meaningful participation throughout the life cycle of this research. And our focus was actually mapping out the adaptations that these communities have, the adaptations that they are adopting, and at the same time identifying those barriers that they face when actually implementing these adaptations, and trying to unlock the potential for these adaptations. Some of the key findings in this research, one of the key findings was that for the researchers, for those doing programming, it is very important that we be intentional, especially about sequencing and their participation to incrementally advance local data adaptation. The second finding from this research was that it is very key that we actually give these communities opportunities to define, prioritize, and diagnose their problems. The third key finding is that we actually need to investigate the specific barriers that for the locally led adaptations for these communities, and highlight the needs and opportunities for meaningful participation throughout this process. And finally, it's very important that we understand that participatory research can actually help to build a foundation for local led decisions, decision-making and programming on climate adaptation. Then on recommendations, our first recommendation was that when planning for research or programming, actors supporting local led adaptation should be specifically inclusive when defining the full range of local stakeholders and their desired level of participation. The second recommendation out of this research is that at very early stages of research or programming, we need to actually use participatory data collection tools or facilitation techniques to empower these communities to prioritize climate challenges in ways that draw on local knowledge, their own knowledge, because they are the ones who understand the problems in these specific areas. The third recommendation out of this research is that actors supporting locally led adaptation should actually use participatory research or assessment tools to identify community-led adaptations and climate risks, and to probe the types of community engagements that overcome these barriers. And finally, the actors supporting locally led adaptation should actually integrate participatory research methods throughout programming cycles to simultaneously meet evidence needs and model good governance norms and behaviors. So that is a very short presentation from me. And yeah, sorry. Yeah, that is it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Milka, and also Jeffrey for again keeping time. Much appreciated. So, Milka, let me start with you. Based on the findings that you have shared, what surprised you or really struck you about the innovation itself?
I think having worked in Nigeria and Barista, done a study in Nigeria and Barista, I was actually surprised about the innovations taking place in Somaliland, which, based on the context, I think they are actually innovations. So one of the things that was very stood out for me, very different, is in Kenya, Ethiopia, Nigeria, even Ghana, you have digital innovations. That is not the case in Somaliland, or we didn't come across that. Yes, they're using WhatsApp to communicate, and they have phones, but in terms of like the apps that we are talking about, we didn't come across about that. So that was surprising. And they have something like close grazing, which I'm yet to see in Kenya, but just speaking to the last convener, I think is practicing it. So that was surprising for me as well.
And just what struck you about the way that the innovation was, say, being adopted, let's say?
Sorry?
What struck you about the innovation process being adopted?
It's how they share it, it's how they come together to actually think about it, and it's how they purpose to progress it and then share it within the community. So, if I could give an example of this, a veterinary doctor, a male veterinary doctor who's training ladies, and initially this was resisted, but as the community gets to see what the apprentice ladies are doing, then they are opening up to it, and the community is very open about sharing what they've learned and what they're doing and what is helping them.
Thank you. Jeffrey, coming to you. So, based on your work with phase 2 research and the range program in Samburu, what innovative approaches have you seen that help the household and the communities reduce risk and adapt in fragile and conflict-affected areas? And this is a very nice segue to the previous session that we actually had. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. There are actually a number, and I'll say the first key one is that trying actually to blend the traditional knowledge with the scientific one. In this case, one good example is the participatory rangeland management approach that is currently being used by the community. But if you embed that with the satellite technology, trying to see where actually pasture exists, trying to see where the communities can move their animals during the crisis, so that would be very key. The second one is actually trying to introduce alternative livelihoods to these communities. These are actually pastoralist communities who entirely depend on livestock for their livelihoods. So to try and reduce the shocks, the climatic shocks to these communities, we actually need to try and introduce sustainable or alternative livelihoods that can actually assist them in their day-to-day lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. So I have a question for all of you as panelists, because clearly you all are working in very, very diverse contexts and in different regions. We have right from West Africa to East Africa, so the whole stretch. So given that the relevance of context, I think we've established that, right? That context is very important. So given the relevance of contextual elements for the success of interventions, how should interventions be adapted or customized to other contexts? So what would it actually take? So let's start with Milka, and then we can go in reverse order.
I think spending some time in the context that you want to implement in and understanding the needs of the people, and then at the very best, co-creating with the people as well. Prioritize what their needs are and what you have to offer, and then you can determine the ground.
Yeah, I think for me, participatory approaches is something that needs to be adopted, whether it's in a research, whether it's in the programming. We actually need to adopt that set of research because when dealing with the communities, especially the pastoralists, they are the ones who actually understand their problems. We should avoid the top-down approach and go for bottom-up approach. When doing research, for example, you should start the designing of the research with these communities. Let them come up with the design of the research. Let them participate in the data collection. You should have the local researchers to assist you in the data collection because they are actually the ones who understand the local context. So participatory approaches should be adopted, whether it's in programming or in research. Thank you.
Yeah, I think from our experience evaluating this study, a lot of it is about designing the intervention with the community, what we've been calling co-creation process. For example, in the region approach, there was this approach that has been adopted somewhere else, like this rangeland grazing, and then it's about well, we have this idea, then we come to this different context. You cannot just adapt it like that. And that's where it enters a lot going from a bottom-up approach, where it's kind of a mix. I think sometimes having a top and a bottom, it's kind of a nice mix where you have something that has worked somewhere else, but then you work with the community, and then that kind of helps create something new. And always thinking about innovations are fluid. It's not we innovate once and that's it and everything works. For example, regions seem to be very, very successful in Ethiopia because of the particular communal structure that they have. Now, will it work somewhere else? The question the answer is maybe not exactly the same way that it is right now in Ethiopia, but at the end, communities have structure. And maybe the question is, let's discover that structure.
I think you need to start from what works, because these communities have been innovating on their own so many times over centuries to try to adapt to the environment. So whatever we are introducing is not coming to just be starting from nothing. So that's one thing that we've learned. And the second one is if it is a no, it has to be a fast no. And we say yes, then it has to be a fast yes. Because we take for granted how long it takes to engage these pastoralists. We think it's forever. We come with a 4-year project and then we are there with them, and then when it's done and then they are expecting something, then we say no, this is the end of it. I think for us as a commercial company, we want to ensure that whatever decisions that we have to make that focus on livelihoods of people, we do it as quickly as possible and find the outcome as quickly as possible so we can move. I think these two are very critical in adopting innovations in different regions.
Great, thanks a lot. So fast yes or fast no, fluidity, start from the beginning, don't get them in as you go along. Great takeaways. So now it's time for the audience. So in yesterday's session, there were some questions that you as an audience asked about innovation. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to throw back one of those questions right back at you, and we would like to start with some comments and some thoughts. I'm taking this idea from this in the morning. I think it was quite nice. So I'm not claiming it's my own. So basically the question that I have for you as an audience is, and of course our panelists have answers, but we want them quite a bit for now. So let's get back to you. What do you think supports innovation and how does it move forward?
So who would like to respond and maybe get their heads out of their laptops on, what was the question?
What supports innovation and how does it move forward?
What supports innovation and how
Does it move forward?
How does it move forward? Who has some thoughts? Okay, good. And Lee, I'm probably going to call on you because you were asking a lot of questions yesterday.
This is Anne-Kisa, I'm a climate and health researcher, but surprisingly, I learned this idea from a very student around gender equality. And the study you did in Somaliland comparing with the other countries and the innovations that were there and the digital innovations that were there. And in response to your question from her presentation, equity is what will support innovativeness. What makes your idea superior to mine? What makes my idea priority, innovation in my own context that I live in? And I like the way you brought out how those women were innovating in their spaces. And that means also when we think about innovation, we shouldn't just think about the digital innovation the way we know it, but perhaps the way the community would like to prioritize it. That voice is very rare. That's what needs to come out. Equity of voice and equity of as important as the research I was getting in, as we often do in communities. That's my response. Thank you.
I think one thing we're learning from other efforts, one thing we're learning from other efforts is that what causes innovation to stick is not usually because people are using it for one purpose. You think about WhatsApp. People use WhatsApp because of social connections. And it's a good place to get information and juicy gossip. And so that serves mutual purposes that we have to pay attention to, much like the corner grocer serves a similar purpose too. You don't get your groceries, but you also catch up on the latest news and information. So being aware of where people are going to, being in places where they are pursuing innovation, I think matters. And I hear that coming up also in this research methods.
Hi there, Chris Bessnecker, Senior Director of Innovation is in my title, so I should probably have a response to this. I think what we have discovered is innovation is really solves an intractable problem. So it's a problem where current practices, current convention has sort of topped out. We're not seeing any sort of market improvement from what's currently out there. And so other than just being something that's different, it has to solve this intractable problem. And it has to solve it to your point of how does it progress in a remarkable way. So when you have something new that comes along that solves something in a remarkable way, it's either much more, it's faster, it's more efficient, it's costs much less. You're going to see an adoption and a movement forward in ways that perhaps the conventional approaches aren't presenting.
All right, we'll go to, do we want to stay with the feedback or do we want to go with the Q&A eventually?
I think there were like 3 hands. You can take those and then move to Q&A, or you can segue to Q&A as you want.
Yeah, that's okay. Hello everyone, it's Rosie Great, and I'm here previously at Convened. And when I think of
innovation, I think of change in the future, future generations as well. And so I think engaging youth in innovation is really, really important. I think when you work with youth, they've got an energy and a drive, which is really important. So that is sort of my first point. The other point is, I think also collaborating with people from other disciplines. When we think of sort of the innovation which has come out and has been successful, it's probably not just only working with people in the digital sector or only working with people from gender studies and anthropology. It's sort of making sure that we are talking to lots of different sectors when we're working together towards innovation. So,
All right, Elizabeth has to speak because she always has excellent comments. So we'll do 2 more comments. Oh, that's fine. Okay, and then we'll start going into questions.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I believe with innovation, we really need to encourage creativity because innovation cannot just come when someone is not curious enough and when someone is not creative. So I believe in this context, we really need to also create a culture and collaboration, because with the culture, it encourages experimentation, where people now find new skills, and when you have the skills now, you think outside the box. For example, when I was in the field, this year, early February and March, I was seeing women using mosquito net for storing groundnuts. But you see, mosquito net were distributed to be used, for preventing mosquitoes. But the thing outside box, and they use these mosquito nets as part of storage, which was never there before. So you see, because they were trained that mosquito net is used for protecting the children and themselves from mosquito bites. But you see the thing outside the box. So the most important thing is for us to create a culture that encourages, experimentation and collaboration. With the collaboration, this is where we can move on. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lee Mackey from ODI. I think I'm going to touch on stuff that Milky you've already said, and also Claire's research. We carried out research in 4 of the Zara counties in South Sudan, and it was looking at innovation and change for people's livelihoods. I think we came up against, that definitional problem was innovation, what counts as innovation, and this was very much looking at sort of the local level of people's livelihoods. And I think when it came to the definition, I think as I said yesterday, people didn't really care whether you call it innovation, change, product change, etc. It was just about what works for them at that time. People were moving between one thing to the next, depending on their situation and what was working and what wasn't. I think in terms of going back to what the question about what helps to spread. Milky, you talked about networks, and that's exactly what we found. Networks were so important for sharing skills, knowledge, resources, but the one thing we picked up on as well, and I think you picked up on this earlier, was this confidence. Right? Often being the one to innovate, you have to be confident, right? You have to take that first leap and do something that's out of the norm and what others aren't doing. It takes a level of self-confidence, and how people get that. We saw personal experience, people who travelled, people that overcome some form of, hardship, getting that drive, etc. But I think the important thing after that was then the spread of that confidence to other people, i.e., whether they shared those ideas with other people, and other people saw, okay, this person's doing it, and we can do it. And also, Elizabeth, what you're talking about, this creativity, this culture, curiosity. People will bring back ideas to areas like rearing livestock, to areas that just used to be growing crops. And this guy was a pig farmer, for example, and people laughed at him at first, and then they saw him doing well, it's like, oh, okay, now we want to do this, and then he was sharing this idea. So yeah, a lot of this came back to networks. It wasn't about giving people skills or resources. People were finding that themselves within their networks. It was perhaps about connecting people to ideas through these networks. So yeah.
So count those two, one and three.
Yeah, there's definitely.
Okay, three.
Thanks very much. Yeah, so I'm actually going to comment on that question and segue into a question for the speakers because I think it's really connected. For me, innovation is about finding new ways to solve problems. If there was no problem to begin with, I wouldn't necessarily need to innovate. And in order for my innovation to be sustainable, so assuming my problem continues, unless if I stop doing what I've innovated, my problem will come back. So in order for the innovation to be sustainable, there has to be no or minimal cost to me. So it also has to be financially viable. And this is where I'm going to comment a question for Peter. I was really fascinated. I was interested in all the speakers, but Peter, I was really fascinated by the fact that your innovation is coming from the private sector and is at least trying to break even. You're eventually make a profit. And from that, then you talked a lot about experimenting with reaching women with gender accommodative approaches and gender transformative approaches. Some really interesting points there. My question to you, as a private sector outfit innovating in that way, what made you want to even go down that route of exploring the gender aspects of it? That's my question.
No, we just collect. Okay, so maybe start from here with they and they have been waiting for a while.
Okay, thank you. I'm mentioned, but so in matters of innovation, looking on the incentive side. So, okay, what really speaks to higher adoption in terms of innovation strategies? Are there clear economic or social benefits for the community? So, looking at the aspects of risk sharing in terms of institutional and partnerships within the communities. Like an example, if you're dealing with water producers, if you're dealing with marketing groups, breeders and such, okay, are there clear social benefits for them, or are there clear incentives that for the long term will benefit the community? Thank you.
Thank you. I think Maraj said mostly by this. My question is just first, Peter, when do you plan to expand your innovation to South Sudan? Because there's going to be a lot of business for you. You have a very good Kenyan community in South Sudan in Juba, so you will be very much welcome.
Your marketing guy.
Very short question, Miguel. I'm quite interested about your presentation in relation to the mobile app, which is providing real-time information on dryland health. One, I wanted to know what are these indicators of the range and health, and then how do you account for more nuanced variation in vegetation health or vegetation quality as you process this information?
Thank you. My name is Pacifica, and my question is to Milka. I will not attempt to answer the question about innovations. I think all the answers have been most have been given. But I'm curious. We talked about younger women and older women taking up economic opportunities. What other intersectional identities stood out? I have read a lot about young women, for example, getting into marriages and then, pursuing divorces just so that they can pursue economic opportunities. I don't know whether you came across that. And then another cohort are the widows, with some sort of independence, and that raises questions. Do men have to die for women to be empowered? Thank you.
Maybe we'll have this one. So Peter, maybe Peter, then Miguel, and then the.
Yeah, so I think I'll answer the second one because I forgot the first one.
I have it.
Yeah, but your question about why we attempted to understand the gender dynamics in to be sincere, no business invests in business because it's a cost that we might not recover, right? And one of the reasons why we are still struggling with our unity communities because we actually gone a bit further than just being a business to try and do some of these things. And the simple question, the simple answer to this question is if you are familiar with the business model canvases, one part of it is to understand your customer segments. And so when we start digging deep, we realize that smallholder farmers or pastoralists, when you come to the livestock sector, the segment is quite difficult. There isn't that much economic books out there to understand that segmentation. And the research that we did even further confirmed the fact that data segregation and try to understand why women are actually owning cattle, goods, even the majority of the cows and goods in the household is owned by these women, but they never own up to say, this is my cow, because culturally it's not allowed, right? So coming from such a community, I mean, my aunties and my grandma, and my sisters, the cousins, they own animals, but they don't, it affects the service adoption because if you go to the community to deliver vaccines and they tell you, oh, my husband is not there, so we have to go and plan. Obviously, it affects the business. So that is why we need for service adoption, we need to actually segment properly and make sure that we are also having all the segments represented in the way that you deliver the service.
The incentive one, I think, was more of a comment. It said that are there clear social and cultural benefits and long-term benefits for the community? So I think it was more of like a comment. I don't think it was a question. And the third one is when are you going to South Sudan?
So I think someone asked me some time ago when I was going to lunch in Nigeria. But those are very critical questions on business expansion. We've looked into South Sudan as we've also looked into Ethiopia and Somalia. One of the things that we love to do is to take that challenge of looking at where are the services most needed, but at the same time also understanding if the foundational demand is there. So, for instance, we just came to Kenya. We are in the southern rangelands, and hopefully we'll be going to the northern rangelands this year. So we are very ambitious, but definitely we have to start from somewhere. And we fully believe in partnerships. So if there are organizations already doing something with, pastoralists, and we can piggyback on that to bring our innovation, which is how we built it. We built it to be able to adopt with partnerships. So that is, we are very open, not this year, maybe not next year, but we can start the conversation to see how South Sudan can benefit from our innovation.
Thank you.
If I remember.
I wrote it down.
Okay.
So yeah, so what are the indicators of rangeland health that you used during your evaluation, and how do you account for more nuanced indicators on rangeland health and vegetation?
Okay, so the indicators are based on satellite information, so that is processed, and it's the main indicator is which is commonly used, the NDVI, the normalized difference vegetation index. And that's a number, but then the way it's presented in the app, it's presented in a gray, in a color gray, like if you go from yellow, brown, which is like, I mean, very bad, like rangeland conditions or vegetation conditions, to green that are quite good rangeland, quite good vegetation conditions. That's kind of like the main indicator that is being presented in the app, which kind of like this NTDI summarizes different things, not just precipitation, it accounts for different things.
Okay, I think that's pretty much. Milka, do you remember your question?
But I'll try. So younger women and older women. Younger women because I think, again, just looking at the context they're growing in the culture, so being educated, wanting to solve for the community, because again, amongst the Somalis, solving for the community is very important to them. So again, taking up activities that they think would not just benefit themselves, but benefit the community. Older women, I think older women because they've stayed in marriage, they understand marriage, and they're a bit clearer about what they want to do. Some of them, their children have grown up. We had a lady who had been divorced 4 times, but because this economic ambition was so important to her, she decided that that was a price she was willing to pay. Yeah, actually there were two of them who had been divorced. So one case was shared by a lady and the other case was shared by a man, where the man was telling us this woman initially, the husband didn't want her to do any economic activities, divorced her. But after observing her and how she was living her life and how her life was progressing, he went back and they got back married. Yeah. Do men have to die for women to innovate? No. I think what is interesting in Somaliland is that the men are, I think it's more of a tension, dilemma for them. They realize that the home in itself has a lot of work. So apart from the children, the women are the ones who are taking care of the goats and the sheep, and they're the ones taking care of the younger animals. So I think to the men they struggle, if this woman is going to go out of the home, so who's going to take care of these other animals that are here and the young children? There's a bit about the man being a bit skeptical about this independent woman, but that was mentioned by 2 men. So I think maybe there's a bit to be explored further over there, but for now that's what I have. Yeah, that's my answer. Does it make sense?
We're okay to stay with questions? People, like, you can't tell, you're all kind of half asleep, but sort of awake.
You can take one more round of comments and questions.
I'm concerned about the other side of innovation. I've seen in some rural area in northern Kenya that the combination of WhatsApp and YouTube has taken over lives. You see elders who normally will be talking about serious things, listening to laughing cartoons and stories and zombies, like zombies there. So I wonder how you deal with such a thing. I mean, there's probably learning, there's probably exchange of knowledge, but they're into, they're listening to the parliament in Mogadishu discussing things that have nothing to do with life in northern Kenya, for example. So how do you deal with this?
I think that's the $1 million question coming from you. So we'll hold that one. I think that's what our plan. So our plan is to take more questions or comments, and then we'll do that round of responses. Any additional questions, comments? Since it's really no hands up, I just wanted to make a comment. We have developed this panel for a few different reasons. Our research leads on most of the digitech were not available to come. So that's kind of a gap that we have, besides sort of AgriScout and part of Caltrack.
So I do apologize that that voice and really what Hassan is mentioning isn't as represented on this panel. But when we looked at, in the beginning, I shared, initially we found 45 digital innovations. At the end, we found a total of 145 innovations. For the vast majority, especially of the digitech, or had a digital element, AfriScout was one of the only ones that was sustaining and was having an impact that we could tell. Many of them had died. They lived, someone came from outside, developed an awesome app, and it didn't work, and they went back home. And then we saw that more and more, and kind of as a comment to this panel, one of the common elements in these, which we found across the SPARC research, is that ability to iterate, ability to co-create with communities and such. That had one of the greatest indications of success or sustaining through. So which is why we kind of purposely brought these ones here. That's not, I don't even, I stay up late at night wondering that same question that you asked. But maybe there's some responses here.
You all want to try and respond to Dr. Bashir's question? Okay,
I think, again, we sometimes look at these things as though we have the capacity to control what is out there, right? And that's not the whole purpose of innovation. I think the goal is to look at how, again, there are two sides of it. Like these same community people, elders are also using these same tools for other things. I can think of myself, like what I use my WhatsApp for. You know, maybe to connect with my student group back in high school, which has nothing to do with what I'm eating today or what I'm doing today in the office and all that. So for me, I think it's just about how do we support these communities to get the best innovations available to them. But definitely there is also that opportunity, that chances that there will be misuse of certain tools and all these things. And at the end of the day, they have the capacity to make certain decisions when they have more options than just YouTube and WhatsApp alone. The idea is to get as much productive tools as possible to them so that they can actually spend more time on the productive one than the ones that might probably distract. Yeah.
I feel Jeffrey wants to respond to you.
No, I think Peter summarized it very well. I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Okay,
so if there are no burning questions, also the fact that we're going to 6 o'clock and I'm sure everybody's waiting to start the drinking. So if there are no burning questions, we are going to wrap up now, but we are going to wrap up with a sound bite from each of you. So assume that if the CNN or the BBC decide to catch you randomly and ask you for a 30-second sound bite, and this was your question, what would you respond? And I mean, keep it to 30 seconds, don't go over 5 minutes. So, scaling as an innovation in fragile contexts is notoriously difficult. You all know, right? What is it about your innovation that would make business sense to a pastoralist to adopt and to enable scaling? Peter, you go first.
Partnership and co-creation, because at the end of the day, the farmers are they know their problems better, and we start with partnering with them as part of the process to get them. Number two is that we focus on cost reduction. No matter how we look at innovation, cost is a key drawback in people innovation. We just talk about WhatsApp, which is free, but it's adopted because it probably might not come to them with that cost. We also believe that it has to be part of an ecosystem of other services. It cannot just stand alone. Most of us are looking at bringing innovation as a standalone solution, we should be bringing in to see how it can adopt in the context of other innovations in the society.
Yeah, so it's important to think both at the cost of an innovation, also at the impact, and also to think of innovations in the context of similar innovations or innovations doing or approaches doing similar things. And not be scared about a high cost, but also how does it compare with the impact and with other ones. And also, there might be sometimes an initial high cost, but there are, in many cases, in many innovations, and that's the case of AgriScout, like once you have overcome that initial cost, once you know kind of how things work, things can be much cheaper and easily spread.
Yeah, thank you very much. For me, when it comes to participatory approaches, I can say that we don't have too much flexibility on that. For you to have, whether you are doing programming, whether you are doing research, for you to have community trust, for you to have sustainable projects, for you to have community ownership, you have to adopt participatory approaches. Thank you.
I think it must meet their priority need, it must be relevant to their context, and it must be easy to use.
Well done. Well, actually, okay, next time onwards, we know who to catch the songbirds. So to conclude, so what I can sum up from this is, the keywords when we write papers at the end of the abstract is basically partnership, procreation, impact, community trust, priority, and ease of use.